Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Part 166 based on novel. So let's start. Soul Core. The second group was completed. Hua Yuhao let out a long breath. After he finished his second group of core formations, he finally lifted his head and stretched his neck to relax. What time is it, eldest senior? Hua Yuhao asked Bei Bei. Bei Bei replied, it's only 4 more hours to daybreak. All right. Hua Yuhao responded before he got to work once again. The rest had already returned to rest. Only Bei Bei, Ji Juechen, Xian Ziwen, and Hikaitu remained in the room. It was normal for Hikaitu and Xian Ziwen to remain behind. However, Ji Juechen caught everyone by surprise by staying as well. He didn't say anything either, and only stood where he was like a target board. He silently observed Hua Yuhao. There were undulations in his eyes, as if he were thinking of something. The others didn't disturb him. This sword fanatic had a different mindset from ordinary people. However, his cultivation speed didn't lag compared to those from Shrek 7 monsters. Right now, he was sparring less and less with the others. However, there was an obvious improvement every time he did so. In addition, he had identified one opponent, and kept going to that opponent. This relieved the pressure on many others. This person that he had identified was Shu Sancha. Ever since Shu Sancha gained the Xuanwu shield and fused with the Golden Tortoise, his abilities were on the rise. He had even beaten Ji Juechen. In addition, his defense was so strong that he was unafraid against Ji Juechen. In the Tang sect, Ji Juechen was known for having the strongest defense, while Shu Sancha had the strongest defense. It was only right for the two of them to spar. Shu Sancha avoided Ji Juechen, as he didn't want him to find him. Hua Yuhao only took 1 hour to finish the second group of core formations. However, he slowed down on the third group. This was because the third group of core formations was the most complex. The requirements for precision were also much greater. There was one formation that was in the center of the entire formation. This formation was the smallest, but the most complex. It was only the size of a cherry, but the patterns that had to be carved on it were very complex. There were easily 2 or 3 times more patterns in this one than there were in the others. Hua Yuhao first completed the 7 other formations in the third group before he started on this most complex formation. He was very careful, and slowed himself down. The golden lights in his eyes were much brighter than before. This was because he was afraid of making even the slightest error. Xian Ziwen silently watched at one side. He had a look of admiration by now. He didn't know what to say about this student in front of him. Hikaitu was slumped at one side. Originally, he had thought that Hua Yuhao had wasted his learning on soul tools after more than a year of hard work, and that he would have caught up with him because of that. However, it seemed like he didn't manage to do so. He even seemed to have lagged further behind. The gap between their talents couldn't be closed so easily with hard work. However, his slump only lasted for an instant. Hikaitu was also very tenacious. Even if he couldn't catch up right now, that didn't mean he would forever be behind. At a certain standard, persistence, luck and intelligence all played very important roles. Hua Yuhao suddenly stopped as he was halfway through carving his core formation. Xian Ziwen was surprised when he stopped. Although he really wished for Hua Yuhao to stay and learn more about soul tools with him, he also subtly hoped that Hua Yuhao would succeed. Successfully creating an advanced tier soul tool was a great confidence booster for a soul engineer. This was why he felt very conflicted right now. It was very critical for a soul engineer to finish a core formation in one go. Stopping halfway was a recipe for disaster. However, following this, Xian Ziwen saw Hua Yuhao's Eye of Destiny slowly opening. Rose gold sun rays spread from the Eye of Destiny. Very soon, they covered his entire forehead. The spiritual undulations in the room suddenly became very strong. Whether it was Hikaitu, Bei Bei, Xian Ziwen or Ji Juechen, they could clearly sense that their spiritual sea started to surge under the stimulation of that immense spiritual power. His spiritual power is so strong. Is it really possible for a soul sage to possess such immense spiritual power? Xianzhuan suddenly lifted his hand and shut his mouth. This was the only way he wouldn't exclaim. He only took a glance at the Eye of Destiny before he saw the deep whirlpool within it. As he quickly shifted his gaze away, he was already shocked in his heart. If it was only a guess earlier, he was fully certain now. Yes, Hui Yuhao has a soul core. It's even a spiritual soul core. He only has 7 rings, 7 rings. Xianzhuan's actions didn't catch anyone else's attention. This was because they also saw Hui Yuhao's Eye of Destiny. Ji Juechen's reaction was the quickest. He had the strongest willpower. In his heart, there was only his sword and Jing Ziyan. There was nothing else. This was why he quickly shut his eyes when he found out that Hui Yuhao's expression wasn't right. At the same time, he started to think about his sword intent. This helped him to break free from the weird spiritual undulations. Bei Bei was like Ji Juechen. Although he wasn't as pure as Ji Juechen, his willpower was still very strong. Once he discovered that something was amiss, he immediately lifted his hand to cover his eyes. At the same time, he unleashed his radiant holy dragon and circulated his soul power to protect his spiritual sea. This was why he wasn't too greatly affected. Xianzhuan was a titled Doluo. Although he was astonished, he was fine. He Kaitu was the only one who was in trouble. He was originally astonished by Hui Yuhao's soul engineering talents. When Hui Yuhao's Eye of Destiny opened, he only felt dizzy before he was drawn in by Hui Yuhao's soul core. He couldn't shift his eyes away, and subconsciously took a step forward. However, he discovered something was wrong after taking this step. He tried to shut his eyes, but he realized he couldn't do so. Hui Yuhao's spiritual power was simply too strong. Furthermore, his soul core was spinning at the greatest speed the moment he opened his Eye of Destiny because he was too focused. This was why he was so greatly affected. Fortunately, there were others in the room. Xianzhuan immediately rushed to Hikaitu's side and quickly covered his eyes. He then smacked Hikaitu's shoulder with his other hand. Hikaitu jolted awake from his astonishment. As he twisted his head to look at Xianzhuan, there was already a horrified look on his face. Xianzhuan sighed and shook his head to signal Hikaitu not to look at Hui Yuhao's vertical eye. At this moment, Hui Yuhao had already resumed carving. This time, he was evidently faster. Scraps of metal slipped off his fingernail. The small metal ball seemed to be dancing in his hands. Can he really succeed? No one knew the answer to this question, including Hui Yuhao himself. However, that tiny metal ball kept on changing. The dense patterns on it increased and increased. At the very end, the entire metal ball was shaped like a fretwork, and strange soul power undulations gradually surfaced within it. Xianzhuan took in a deep breath before slowing letting it out. Before, he had used an entire day to finish this core formation. It was also then that he felt as if he had reached the peak of his abilities in terms of soul tool production. He would never forget that feeling. But right now, Hui Yuhao proved to be in better shape than he was back then. Furthermore, he had seen the blueprint for less than 3 days. He didn't have any experience or knowledge of how to create Class 8 soul tools. 2 hours passed. Hui Yuhao finally slowed down. There were beads of perspiration falling off his forehead. However, he was still as focused as ever. He didn't waver at all. His immense spiritual power ensured that he was still fully concentrated. He's about to finish it. Xianzhuan subconsciously clenched his fists. Yes, I'm about to finish it, Hui Yuhao said to himself. He was only left with the final step, but this was a very difficult step to take. This last carving required him to twist his blade 18 times consecutively in one go before the patterns could be engraved. This didn't just require control of his spiritual power, but also strong soul power to support this motion. This was because this last carving was inside the rare metal. He needed to condense his soul power into a thin needle to perform the carving. Even a needle-shaped tool wouldn't work, because it wouldn't be sharp enough. Also, the angle couldn't be controlled as freely as it could with his soul power. This piece of rare metal in Hui Yuhao's hand was very tough. He needed to carve it using his soul power, twist his needle 18 times consecutively, and do everything with the same magnitude of strength. Unless one was a soul dolor, all of these were almost impossible. Xianziwen had the urge to ask Huiyu how to stop right now and let him finish this final step. In this way, Huiyuhao's previous efforts wouldn't be wasted. Otherwise, if he failed, it would deal a huge blow to him. Just as he was hesitating, Huiyuhao had already started. His left thumb and index finger pressed gently against the core formation. Even though he only touched it with his fingertips, his grip was still very sturdy. He had also retracted his dark golden terror claws. A small, jade-green needle-shaped light slowly appeared on his fingertip. Ice needle. Following this, Huiyuhao moved his fingers. His body shone with jade-green light, while the ice needle that he had formed pierced into the core formation delicately. Under Huiyuhao's control, it started to twist. The entire thing was a little raw. It wasn't perfectly smooth. However, Huiyuhao didn't stop at all. His eye of destiny shone even brighter, illuminating his soul core. He completed this 18-rotation carving. He didn't even know some of the techniques because he had never learned them before. However, how did he complete it? Using his own way, he drained twice the amount of soul power. Xianziwen was filled with questions and astonishment right now. He couldn't believe that someone could be so talented. However, whether he believed it or not, Huiyuhao still continued. In addition, he was still pouring out his soul power with even greater speed. The small core formation was already exuding dim silver light. This was evidently the result of pouring in his soul power. Moreover, it wasn't his ice-type soul power, but his pure soul power. There weren't any elements to this soul power. This also meant that Huiyuhao was multitasking right now. Xianziwen's facial muscles were contorting. However, he was already numb in his heart. Was this a miracle? No, it wasn't a miracle to him anymore. It was a complete wonder. Whoosh! A light sound was heard. Huiyuhao's jade-green ice needle brought out the last scrap of metal. The core formation had already been activated as Huiyuhao poured in his soul power, and it now magically drifted in mid-air. There were tiny but obvious spatial cracks around the dim silver light. There were indeed spatial elements. This most vital core formation had finally been completed. Huiyuhao let out a long breath and held onto the carving table as he panted. All 24 core formations had been completed, along with the outer shell of this soul tool. What Huiyuhao had to do next was piece them all together before he was fully finished. Without a doubt, this assembly process would require greater soul power and technique. However, was he troubled? Huiyuhao lifted his head and smiled at Xianziwen. Teacher Xian, do we still have time? Xianziwen turned gloomy. Cut the crap. Be serious. Yes. Huiyuhao's attitude was very positive, and he respectfully acknowledged Xianziwen's words. After that, he immediately began, and started to piece the components together. Doesn't he need to rest for a while? His arms opened to either side of his body. After this, he raised them up. Suddenly, the other 7 core formations in the third group all flew up and drifted in mid-air. There was an invisible air current around Huiyuhao's arms that was guiding these pieces of metal. Controlling crane capturing dragon. Bei Bei muttered softly. The 7 pieces of metal slowly gathered. Under Huiyuhao's control, they were congregating towards the silver ball that drifted in the air. This works? This time, Xianziwen was watching with a learning attitude. Among the 3 groups of core formations, this was the group that was the most difficult to form. The difficulty lay in the fact that the core formations had to be joined together as the Soul Master poured his soul power into them. There wasn't any room for error at all. Even if he could do it, he would still need some tools to complete it. But right now, he was only using his own abilities. Wasn't he afraid that his soul power was insufficient? His spiritual soul core spun quickly, and provided a large amount of soul and spiritual power to Huiyuhao. The 7 core formations that were in the air were under his strict observation. He adjusted their positions and slowly but steadily joined them together. When they were only an inch from the silver ball, Hui Yuhao stopped them, then poured his soul power into all of them at the same time. Immediately, these 7 core formations brightened and exuded gentle silver light. At this point, Hui Yuhao carefully controlled them as they combined. With his spiritual detection in action, he didn't need to worry about any errors. Clang! An apple-sized group of core formations had been formed. Blinding silver light was rapidly sucking away Hui Yuhao's soul power. Among these 8 core formations, there were energy-storing core formations. This Class 8 decomposition cannon had to maintain the circulation of soul power within it as a means of stabilizing the spatial power. Xian Ziwen was completely in a daze right now. How did Hui Yuhao make this process seem so simple? Hui Yuhao let out a long breath as he saw the silver metal ball drifting in front of him. I finally completed the critical step. Following this, he joined the other 2 groups of core formations. Since he had already joined the most difficult group, the other 2 groups were naturally not a problem for him. The next step would be the installation process. The dark sky slowly turned deep blue. Dawn was about to arrive. Hui Yuhao carried the 1.5 meter Class 8 decomposition cannon that was shining with dim silver light as he stood in front of Xian Ziwen. He has actually completed it. Xian Ziwen subconsciously took the cannon in his arms. He didn't even need to test it. He had personally watched Hui Yuhao create it. Even though he didn't use a conventional method, he didn't make any mistakes throughout the entire process. Hui Yuhao pulled a chair over and sat down. I finally finished it within the time limit. Teacher Xian, can I go this time? Xian Ziwen used one hand to hold the cannon as he grabbed Hui Yuhao with his other hand, saying, Yuhao, did you learn how to create soul tools from someone else? Hui Yuhao laughed bitterly, no. Didn't you see how raw I was? Xian Ziwen's lips moved, raw? You call this raw? You managed to make a Class 8 soul tool after seeing the blueprint for only 3 days. It's even a complex decomposition cannon. You dare to call this raw? Hui Yuhao was a little embarrassed. Teacher Xian, have you forgotten? I was able to make a soul tool above my class before. When I was a Class 5 soul engineer, I could already make a Class 6 soul tool. That's why it's really nothing much. My spiritual power is above average. I have a natural advantage when creating the core formations. Xian Ziwen was a little speechless now. A genius indeed couldn't be measured using common logic. This kid has become a Class 8 soul engineer just like that? Isn't this too ridiculous? No, you can't go. I want you to remain and learn the basic knowledge of a Class 8 soul engineer under me. I have the confidence that you will become a Class 9 soul engineer as long as you can become a title donor in the future. Furthermore, what we really lack now is a talented soul engineer. No matter what, you can't leave this time. What? Seeing how persistent Xian Ziwen was, Hui Yuhao was completely annoyed now. Teacher Xian, you can't go back on your word. Didn't we agree? If I make this decomposition cannon, you'll let me go. Don't worry, I'll be back within a month. Xian Ziwen was adamant. No. Do you know how precious 1 month is? If the war continues, do you know when the enemy will come? Furthermore, I'm not going back on my word. You haven't finished this decomposition cannon. Don't tell me that you can make this soul tool unleash its full strength, even though an 8-ring soul donor would find it difficult. Hui Yuhao's expression turned weird as he looked at Xian Ziwen. Bei patted his shoulder and said, Yuhao, why don't you stay behind? I've already arranged things on the other side. Hui Yuhao shook his head and said, no, eldest senior. It would be fine if it was something else. But we're going to save Teacher Xiao Yue this time. I have to go. Teacher Xian, though I don't wish to contradict you, I have to tell you that I can perfect the use of this decomposition cannon if that means that I can participate in the mission. Rascal, are you out of your mind? It's already not easy for you to create a Class 8 soul tool. You still want to go above your class and try to use it? Creating it and using it are 2 different concepts. Xian Ziwen rambled furiously. Hui Yuhao sighed and said, Teacher Xian, my soul power is already at rank 80. In addition, I have twin martial souls. I have a natural advantage in terms of the total amount of soul power I have. Additionally, the purity of my soul power and the recovery ability of my spiritual soul core means that I can even try a class 9 soul tool. What? Rank 80. Xianzuan wasn't the only one who exclaimed this time. Bei Bei, Hikaitu, and Xianzuan all exclaimed at the same time. Hu Yuhao scratched his head and said, when I got those ice divine crystals, I inadvertently discovered some manifold mysterious ice essence. Only I can absorb that thing. That is why I made great progress. Oh, yes, eldest senior, I went to the ice fire yin yang well and brought back some good stuff. I'll share it with everyone later. The plant-type soul beasts in the world gave it to me. It's the essence that they produce themselves. I believe it can help everyone's cultivation. Bei Bei looked at Hu Yuhao before turning to Xianzuan. He probed, Teacher Xian, surely Yuhao wasn't slacking, right? Xianzuan's breathing had evidently become a little unbalanced. Slack your head. After he finished speaking, he turned his head and left. Just as Bei Bei and Hu Yuhao thought he was angry, Xianzuan's voice sounded from afar. 1 month, just 1 month. 1 month later, you better get back. Do you understand me? You won't be able to leave then. Yes, I understand. Hu Yuhao was delighted. He knew that he had finally convinced Teacher Xian. Xianzuan didn't persist in asking Hu Yuhao to test the cannon. This was because he believed Hu Yuhao wasn't lying. Rank 80? He's already rank 80 at his age? He must have set a record in Shrek Academy's history. Xianzuan appeared to be furious as he left. However, he was actually very delighted. Hu Yuhao's foundation was there. He had full confidence that he could nurture Hu Yuhao into a true Class 8 soul engineer in the future. This matter is finally settled. Hu Yuhao only wanted to sleep right now. He had drained a lot of his energy over the past 3 days and nights. Little Junior, are you fine? If not, we can leave a day later, Bei Bei asked concernedly. Hu Yuhao shook his head and answered, there's no need for that, eldest senior. We can't make Dean Yang and Elder Song wait for us. I'm fine. I'll grab a bite later. I'll take this time to meditate for 2 hours and eat just before we leave. Bei Bei was in a good mood too. With Hu Yuhao around, he was more confident in their mission this time. This was especially after he realized that Hu Yuhao's soul power had reached rank 80. This also meant that the Tang sect finally had a soul donor apart from Teacher Xian. Little Junior, keep the stuff that you brought back from the ice fire yin yang well with you first. There's bound to be casualties because of the war. We'll give them to whoever needs them. It's a waste to directly use it to increase our cultivations. Furthermore, we are cultivating quite well right now. Sounds good. Hu Yuhao acknowledged his words and immediately started to meditate. There was nothing better than meditating to restore his energy right now. Daybreak. The sky had already turned bright, and Bei Bei led those from the Tang sect outside Shrek Academy as they silently waited. Hu Yuhao was still a little listless even though he had already grabbed a bite. However, some of his energy had been restored after resting for 2 hours. He could only rest after getting to the front lines, but Shrek Academy wasn't too far from the fighting. Not long afterward, Dean Yang Xiaoxia and Elder Song walked out from the academy. Elder Song, Dean Yang. Bei Bei hurriedly rushed up to receive them. Elder Song smiled and asked, "Are you guys ready?" "We're all ready," Bei Bei answered. Elder Song was the most senior and was also the strongest. Right now, it was evident that she was leading the rest. Bei Bei was leading the people from the Tang sect. With Xu Sanxia, Jiang Nan Nan, Hu Yuhao, Xiao Xiao, Ji Juechen, and Qiu Qiu, and Yu Gai with him, they indeed had a strong lineup for this mission. Only a few leading figures from the Soul Tool Hall remained in the Tang sect. Xianzuan, Yukaitu, Jiao Delu, Nana, and Jin Ziyan were all holding the fort at headquarters. All right, let's move out. Elder Song waved her hand. She was already flying in the air. Yang Shaoxia nodded at everyone else before he flew up. Ever since the last beast wave and after he was emotionally hurt, he had been keeping a low profile. Now that he was following Elder Song to the front line, and considering that Elder Song was Xian Lina's mother, he became even more reserved. Everyone from the Tang sect followed behind the two transcendent Dolor and proceeded towards the front line. Shrek City was within the Heavenly Soul Empire's territory. It was located to the southeast of the Empire. Even though more than two-thirds of the Heavenly Soul Empire's territory had been occupied, the west of Shrek City was still under the Heavenly Soul Empire's control. Apart from this, the Empire still controlled most of the southeast parts of its borders. The south of the Empire was linked to the Star Luo Empire. To prevent the Sun Moon Empire from attacking them from the south, the Star Luo Empire did their best to support the Heavenly Soul Empire. This helped the remaining troops of the Heavenly Soul Empire regain some stability. East of the Heavenly Soul Empire was the Doling Empire. Close to half of the Doling Empire's troops were in the Heavenly Soul Empire trying to resist the Sun Moon Empire. The three empires of the original Dolor continent could be said to be banding together to fight a common enemy. The team from Shrek needed to cross the plains of the Heavenly Soul Empire and reach the north of it before proceeding to the northwest. In less than 500 kilometers, they would reach the front line. This showed how close the Sun Moon Empire's army was from Shrek City. For someone as strong as Elder Song, flying for 2 hours at her fastest speed would bring her to the front line. With the Tang Sect team with her, they would need around 4 hours. From afar, the Sun Moon Empire's military base could be seen on the ground. This was the first time that everyone from the Tang Sect had seen a battlefield of such a scale. Compared to the borders of the Star Luo Empire, the battlefield here was much larger. The Heavenly Soul Empire had set up their formation in a city known as Heavenly Spirit City. As they had too many soldiers, they had no choice but to extend their formation outside the city. Most of the army was quite spread out. This was to keep them all from being targeted by a single powerful soul tool. Ever since the start of the war, the Heavenly Soul Empire had on many occasions suffered under the hands of stationary soul cannons. There were close to 500,000 soldiers in the three empires. The Heavenly Soul Empire had the most soldiers here. A number greater than 100,000 was already very impressive, not to even mention 500,000. Peering from the sky, it appeared as if there were an infinite number of soldiers. On the other side, the Sun Moon Empire had around 300,000 soldiers 25 kilometers from the borders of the Heavenly Soul Empire. The weather was very good today. This was why the entire battlefield was visible. This was especially so for Hui Yuhao, who used his spirit eyes. He could even see the aerial surveillance soul tools over the Heavenly Soul Empire. What a vast battlefield! Although the Star Luo Empire had many soldiers, most of the empire was covered in mountainous regions, and the scale of its army was also not as great as that of the Heavenly Soul and Sun Moon empires. This was why it wasn't very obvious that they had many soldiers. Rest for a moment. Elder Song asked everyone to stop. They weren't too far from Heavenly Spirit City. In a war, misunderstandings arose easily. To prevent this, it wasn't wise for them to advance recklessly. This video will end here.